Baltimore and out on our YouTube WNSTV channel. I have now repositioned the hat and the T-shirt to include the Stanley Cup champions hat and swag wear that TJ Oshie wore in the locker room after the game. This guy was amongst all the madness along with me out in Las Vegas. We didn't talk a whole lot because he was too busy working. I was too busy working. They were Facebook Living it and tweeting and setting up and pacing the floor. And he had to, make sure Joe Beninati didn't, lose his lunch out there in Vegas. But Rob Carlin is toweled off. He's going to be the first contestant here at WNST to talk about all things Stanley Cup magic. You can find him at Rob Carlin, NBCS, and, of course, at NBC Washington. First off, it's a lot of work to win a Stanley Cup for the players. It certainly is for the broadcasters around the team. I've seen you guys the last 2 months. Get to know your kids. Do they still recognize you, Rob?
They did pull when I got home, one daughter ran over and said, "Daddy," and the other one went, "I don't know who you are. Who are you?" And I was like, "Oh, shot." That was a shot to the heart.
That's the cost of a Stanley Cup championship.
That's the cost of a Stanley Cup champion. So, but they, it feels good to try and assimilate back into normal life because it was basically 8.5 weeks, a little over 2 months of just, mashing the gas down and whatever we needed to do. If it was a Facebook Live in the morning, Facebook Live on game day mornings, and then coming back to the arena that night to do shows, whatever it was. The parade, we did 5+ hours of live, continuous coverage. I mean, it was just anything to be a part of because this was the most fun. I joked with a couple of people. I covered a Delmarva Shorebirds South Atlantic League title in 2000, the Orioles A-League affiliate when I was in Salisbury. This was more fun than that championship run. So, yeah, it was a blast. It was a ton of work, but it was a blast.
Well, I guess just the overriding observation on all of this, and we'll get to Trotz and the contract and all of that, but just the Ovechkin part and the relief and the drinking and the partying and all of that went on, just the pressure let out for Leonsis, for Barry, for all of these players, for the broadcasters, for Al Koken, for everybody out there, for every fan. I thought of all the things, and I did get a little lump in my throat when Ron Weber came by on the float as I was at the corner of Constitution Avenue on Tuesday. But my favorite part of all of it was the bus that went by with the little old lady that had a sign that said, "Season ticket holder since 1974. And I think for anyone that has, and I've been on the train since the late 70s. I covered the LaFontaine game. You and I have been through that. I was up in Long Island, up in your neck of the woods back in the mid-'80s when they beat the Islanders for the first time in '86. So I go way back with all of this. But for the people that have been fans forever and have the old gear, and I have my old starter jacket, and I ran into Rod Langway out on the Mall Plaza, it's just a wonderful thing when your team wins. And I hope it never happens for the Flyers fans. But, for the long-suffering, for the Red Sox, for the Cubs, it's getting to be that way a little bit for Oriole fans now because there's so many bad times. But the party superseded anything I could have ever imagined. And even if they had won in '98, it wouldn't have looked anything like it did. This team is beloved by a whole region now.
Yeah, I've been joking that what they've done since winning the Cup was almost as, if not more, epic than what they did in winning the Cup. I mean, their celebration has raised the bar now for all Stanley Cup winners because they did it the right way, too. Some people might have problems with, quote-unquote, excessive drinking. These are grown men who just accomplished something really special. And like you said, this was a decade plus in the making, 14 years for Ovi since being drafted. I mean, this was just a release of 44 years of frustration for the franchise. And, these guys knew they'd done something special for the city of Washington, for Washington, D.C., for the District of Columbia, which they're now calling the District of Champions. I mean, it changes the whole narrative for a city that's been a punchline for 2+ decades. And, look, they've been fine. No one's gotten in trouble. No one's, from fans, there were no arrests. There was no vandalism. No one broke a window on a storefront. There was nothing in the entire time. All the watch parties, the Stanley Cup celebration, all of it was done really first class, and the players just enjoyed it. If they were getting so drunk that they were embarrassing themselves and doing something that looked bad upon the franchise, that's different. These guys were just having the time of their lives. I mean, they were laughing and joking and handing the Stanley Cup off to fans and knowing that this was all on social media and that wherever they went, there was going to be hundreds of people waiting, and Jacob Rana's taking, Instagram videos with Joe B. I mean, they just included everyone in the celebration. And, right up to the team photo in the morning and the parade on Tuesday. And that's it. I mean, that's the last time that group is going to ever be together, certainly on the ice and in uniform for the team photo. What they accomplished lives forever, but that group is never going to be really back together again in that, form. So why not enjoy the hell out of it? Why not, have the absolute best time and don't look back at one thing and say, man, I wish we had done this. Do it all, because basically starting July 1st, the team's going to look different. So I love it, man. I love it. I didn't grow up here. I've been a part of the coverage of the organization on and off for 7 years. This is my first real full-time only, and I am proud of those guys and happy for the alumni and happy for the fan base. And I just think this whole thing has been magical.
Well, being around them, and I've been around you a lot and seeing you between periods, pacing the floor up in the roof in Tampa and in Las Vegas. You were sitting really close to us there underneath the castle and all that stuff. And the nervousness. I took my wife down at the end of the second period. We're losing in Game 5, and, Beninati's there, and he's, always been very supportive of my wife through her illness and whatnot. And I said, hey, man, we need a miracle. So I brought my wife down here for you. And, of course, these little moments that you have through all of it and the nervousness and the wins and the losses and the struggle and all that stuff. Trotz for me, I was out on the mall before the parade, and I said to him, what'd you think of the fountain diving? He's like, oh, we were all together. I was inside, he said, and I was going beer for beer with him for a while. And he said, and then they started with the keg stands, and then that's when I said, boys, that's when I'm out. He said, you got to know your limits. He said, but I did think about diving in the fountain with him. He said, I thought about it. He said, but I thought, the keg stands, that's where the end was. For all of it, and the overriding part of it for me is hockey and a sport that is not first nature here by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly, Rob, you know of my affinity in Baltimore over 25 years, being really the only Baltimore media guy to ever really embrace and support hockey, and now seeing it get a 12 share, seeing the trains break down, which I was a part of. I must say, you were putting up tweets at 7 o'clock in the morning. I was supposed to be at the team picture. I was at the MARC train at 6:32 a.m. I arrived in D.C. at 10 a.m. Took 3.5 hours to get down there on parade day because that's how many people wanted to get down there. And to see all of that, but the good old hockey game is the best game you can name. I think people have not only fallen in love with the sport, the action, the movement, the rules, the game, the speed, all of the cup, the allure, but the players themselves. That's where I change my tune, because you and I have been at this a while. I'm around football players. I'm around baseball players when they deem me, okay to go around baseball players because I'm taboo around there. But in college basketball, all the things that we cover, the hockey players for me, it was my first beat. It's how I know Barry from 30 years ago. Being around the Oshis and seeing these guys, the Kuznetsovs, and the integrity that's involved in doing this, and watching them do it day. I always wondered how ugly Ovi would be and how he looked like Captain Caveman if the beard got that long. But seeing these guys hydrate, rest, ice, you guys there covering it, back on the ice, back on an airplane, back in the rink, another biggest game of the year, night after night after night. I've never been around that, and this is the first time I've been around that. Wow, man. And I've always tipped my cap to the Blackhawks or the Kings or whomever wins, so the Red Wings back in the day. But seeing it and being on the inside of it, it really was something to behold, even more so than a football championship.
these guys are, and it's only going to start coming out what the injuries were. Brooks Orpik's finger, his thumb, was bashed up in the Stanley Cup in the final against Vegas. It looks like half his finger was hanging off, and you just keep going. These guys are, so tough. They fight through so much. I mean, every athlete does. Whoever gets to a championship, whether it's the World Series or the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup, no one's near 100% because they've had to put their body through so much. But hockey players are just the toughest of the group. I think they're not playing with the pads like the NFL has, and these guys just have to get out there, every other night. And what they've sacrificed, and again, it's a really close group that, like someone like Brooks Orpik, who's probably the guy that takes more Twitter abuse than anyone on that team. 94% of it unfounded. That they just don't like Brooks Orpik for whatever reason. And I always say when people would trash Orpik, if they pull him out of the lineup, Victor Hedman doesn't go in. Drew Doughty doesn't go in. It's Madison Bowie that comes into your third pair and plays with Christian Juice. Brooks Orpik, is he a perfect defenseman at his age? No, but is he a really good third-pair defenseman? He's an amazing third-pair defenseman. I'm so happy that he had such a great playoff run and gets the first game-winning goal in the Stanley Cup in Caps history. But guys like that, they look at Brooks Orpik and how he trains and how he prepares and how he practices. And this group finally said, well, I can't look Brooks Orpik in the face and not be as prepared as he is. And I can't look Ovi in the face and not block a shot like he is. And I can't look Jay Beagle in the face and not be overly prepared like he is. Like every one of them did not want to let down the guy next to them. And you always hear that in football, that you got to trust the guy next to you because every given play, everyone has to do something right for it to be successful. To win 4 rounds in the Stanley Cup, everyone has to do something at some point. You're going to be called upon to do something, whether that's dig a puck out of the corner or, set a screen in front of a goalie or win a big defensive draw. Something's going to be required of every one of you. Excuse me. And these guys fully bought into, I have to play to the best of my ability and then a little bit more, because that's what it's going to take. And teams in the past never got the little bit more. They all did, pretty much what they could to ability, but never more. And this team went for the more, and they're good guys, and they really like each other, and they're easy to do. The hockey players, excuse me, maybe because they grew up, a lot of them on farms in Canada, and the European guys is a different way of life. These guys were not coddled since the time that they were, 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, when they started to really realize they have a special talent. They're the nicest, easiest going guys. And, it's just a likable bunch. And watching all their celebrations, you just say, yeah, I see why they won. They're just good dudes who really like each other and want to be around each other. And it led to something special. And Barry Trotz is right at the forefront of it. And they'll have some tough decisions to make here over the next couple of weeks, which comes up quickly.
Oh, and it comes up way quick. Yeah, when you win the Cup, you got no time at all. I mean, we're drafting, we're doing awards, and they'll be back on the ice in 8 weeks. Like, literally.
Right.
It's
July 1 is the decision, like that. John Carlson, they're going to have to make a decision there. Jay Beagle, they're going to have to make a decision there. What are they going to do with Philip Grubauer? What are they going to do with Michael Kempney? I mean, there's a lot of big decisions that they just haven't had time to think about. They have not had time to prepare. We're so used to the Caps being done by the second week in May. They're fully prepared for what they want to do. This is a much better way to be unprepared.
You end the season without a coach. Let's start with that. And I know Reardon's in there, but any thoughts at all? Because at some point soon, he's either going to stay or he's going to go. And people have asked me, and I don't think he knows, quite frankly. I don't think it's something that's been talked about for so long, because over the last 10 weeks, it hasn't been about extending Barry Trotz or what's his future or woe is me. He's a contract employee that he's acknowledged that he's a contract employee, and his contract's up now. And, oh, look at that. There's the Stanley Cup. Certainly the price of poker has changed. everything has changed for the perception of him, for the perception of all of these free agents, DSP as well, right? So, all of these guys are going to have a different value now because the Cup does that for you. But certainly for the Trotz situation, this is a turning point for him and for the organization. I don't know that it's clear-cut that he stays. I mean, that's a fan talking. I don't know how bad things were behind the scenes. My guess is probably really, really bad for any of us to ever know how bad it was and to have an assistant coach sign long-term when the coach isn't. There's nothing about this that was normal, so I don't expect anything particularly normal this week because I don't think the emotions of this are normal either.
No, I think you're right. I think he's probably in the most unique position any coach has ever been in because not too many coaches are in their final year of their contract and win the Stanley Cup. And, not too many coaches, like you mentioned, had their assistant re-up for a year while he wasn't. And I think it got pretty bad. I think he even has acknowledged mainly about how the team came back really fractured after last year's playoff, but he acknowledged that there was a lot of healing that needed to be done for the whole organization starting in training camp. And, look, I mean, if you worked for a company and you were a high-valued employee and then all of a sudden they were like, I'm not sure I'm keeping you. And not that I've been necessarily a high-valued employee, but I've been in situations where I've been told in my career, we might keep you. We're not 100% sure yet. We're going to reevaluate at the end of the year.
Yeah, go sing for your supper, right? Exactly.
Yeah, it's a tough way to go through life. I mean, I'm a contracted employee too. I live off of 2 to 3 year contracts, and it's a scary way to go through life because someone could just walk in and say, "Oh, Rob's good, but I want to go in a different direction now," and that's that. So it's a tough way to go through, and if you're someone like Barry Trotz, who's so important to what they're doing there, and you're not given that assurance, and all season long, when it does come up, no one said, "Oh yeah, he's done a great job. We'll get that taken care of." It was never spoken about. So he now has all the power, or as the Seinfeld reference, he has the hand. He's got hand now. He's going to be able to write a number down on a piece of paper and slide it across the table and say, that's the number I'm thinking about. I'm a Stanley Cup champion. I want to be paid like Joel Quenneville and Mike Babcock. So there's the number I want. Can you get me there? And, Brian McClellan said the other day after they won the Cup, if he wants to be here, he'll be here, which you look at that two ways, and I don't really have insight. Allen firmly believes that he will be back next year. Tarek firmly believes he will be back next year. I pretty much believe he'll be back next year because they're going to work this out. But you look at what Brian McClellan said, and there's two ways you look at that. A, if he wants to be back, he's back. He won the Cup. He deserves it. Or B, if he wants to be back, he'll be back. That's setting up that this is all on Barry Trotz. If
but
he's
that
not
doesn't
back
mean that your friends up in Long Island don't throw a lot of money at him, or that Minnesota and Fenton in a better situation and a better working environment, and thinking, well, I've already won the Cup here. Like, what would winning a second one mean? I don't know. Probably would mean more to win the first one in Minnesota.
Maybe so, but if you go to Minnesota or Brooklyn with the Islanders. You know what they don't have? They might have more money. You know what they don't have?
Braden Holtby.
Ovi, Backstrom, Carlson, Holtby, Kuzi. They don't have that. Neither one of those teams have that. So, I believe he's going to be back. I just think that it would be bad business, quote unquote, for the team to not bring back the head coach. And I don't know how great it looks on Barry Trotz either, frankly. But it's going to be his decision, and it's so funny how the narrative changes because listening to like NHL radio, it went from sort of the not even lovable losers. Like the Caps weren't even the Cubs. The Cubs were lovable losers. The Caps were just this franchise with a black cloud hanging over their head that had all this great talent and just failed to live up to expectations. Now you listen to NHL radio on Sirius, and it's like, well, why can't they repeat? If they bring Don Carlson, why couldn't a team like that repeat? If Kuzi, gets in the conversation with Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews, Why couldn't they?
Well, they now have
so
that
funny.
makeup because they'll come back with 12 guys that have won, right? Like,
right. Now they know how to win a cup. They know what it takes. They know what the dedication is. They the game that needs to be played. So I'd be stunned if he's not back. I'd just be stunned if they don't work something out and they don't get the money that he now deserves, because he coached his ass off in this run. He did. Every adjustment he made, the Grubauer decision was the decision to pull Grubauer quickly was right. I mean, every button he pushed, every slogan he used, pulling the rope and all those things, everything he did was right. And we always knew he was a good coach. Now we know he's a championship-level coach. And I believe they'll have him back.
Rob Carlin is my friend. He's been on the road and finally getting to reacquaint with his wife and children after a long, long Cup run. He's at NBC Sports and NBC Washington, of course, where they covered morning, noon, night, all things Puck. What's the aftermath of this as you see it? I mean, I think it's one thing to stand out on a 78-degree, flawless day, in the place where the I Have a Dream speech was made and have 500,000 people and the videos look great and it was huge and all that stuff. But the upshot for the franchise regionally, for your network, where, Caps games are getting a 12 share in Baltimore, I do wonder what they do to seize this in the way that the Red Sox really became a regional franchise. And I think they have something unique even going up to Harrisburg and Hershey, where the Beagles and the Holtbys and all those people, there's an affinity for a lot of these players, up and down the corridor. Ted always talks about that super city and all that, the Richmond, New Jersey super city. That's sort of where the television and the media side of this is. I'll tell you this, Rob, and I'm not being a jerk. I didn't realize there was that much Capitals gear that existed, as I saw. Literally, the 500,000 people with red shirts, plus all the shirts that were being sold and hawked on the street. That was the impressive part to me is, wow, look what's happened to the brand of the Capitals, and how do they manage this?
No doubt. That is the Super City is the thing that kept getting to me when the TV ratings would come out as, Washington, D.C. 1, Las Vegas 2, Baltimore 3, Richmond 4. I was like, well, there it is. That's what Ted's been saying, that this is a regional thing, and it showed in the TV ratings almost every single night. And, I think the excitement is that the place is going to be packed for the night that they raise the banner. And walking around the city on Tuesday after the parade and our NBC Sports Washington post-parade celebration got pretty good in the city, too. A lot of us went out and had a good time with fans and just, having a great time. But walking around the city, it was a giant party. Everyone was in red. Every bar, restaurant, and storefront had "Let's Go Caps," all caps, Stanley Cup champ banners. I mean, it was really cool. It was really cool to walk around that city and just see what this meant and what they do to seize on the moment. I don't know. They're pretty good at their branding. I just think that now you're going to have it's the 5 to 7 year bump that you're going to have. You're just going to have these people that are going to come out of the woodworks. And I keep joking that they call it a bandwagon for a reason. There's plenty of room. If they have to bring in more bandwagons, they'll bring in more bandwagons. It's okay. You always knew that the dedicated hockey fans and the Caps fans would be all in on this. But when something like this happens, now you're bringing all the other people that are like, wow, I wasn't really a hockey fan, but my God, that was so exciting. It was so much fun. And every night I watched these playoff games and my heart was racing. And I'm pretty excited to go to a game next year. Like, that's the bump for the whole region, is that more people are going to want to go and more people are going to want to take their kids to experience it. And, they just have to open their doors and know that that's going to be fine. And that's what comes with winning a championship. And, like you said, 500,000 people, roughly estimate for what it was at the parade. You couldn't have told me there were 500,000 Caps fans in January when Holtby started going south and the team wasn't sure they were going to win the Metro. It didn't feel like there were 500,000 Caps fans, but there were at the victory parade. So, you just ride this as long as possible, because while the team breaks up and they'll never be together again, what they've done, what they've accomplished, lives on forever. And there's going to be more kids playing hockey and more kids wearing Holtby jerseys and more kids wanting to be like their heroes now. Like, I grew up with the Islanders. Those were my heroes. I remember one of my friends texted me and said, I'm taking my kid out of school to go to the parade on Tuesday. And I was like, I remember being in the Coliseum when they won their second cup. I remember going to those parades on Hempstead Turnpike in Long Island when I was.
You had your parades on the Turnpike. That's awesome.
That's awesome. I was on Hempstead Turnpike. We go past a White Castle and a deli, and that was our parade route. But it was, that stays with me for my whole life. It stays with you.
Oh, I've had 2 parades with the Ravens in Baltimore, and they are. I was telling Trotz about it at the after party in Vegas. I'm like, it's the most amazing thing. And he said, well, I did a parade in Portland with 100,000 people. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty, that's a lot of people.
Right.
But then you see 500,000 people in the monuments out there and think of the history and the moment of all of it. And think, to your point, I didn't know there were 500,000 Caps fans,
Right.
Like, there's no census that would have told you that other than what happened on Tuesday. And I would think for people like Ted that have been involved in the beginning of trying to grow the thing and trying to get 4,000 people out to the rink to watch the Caps in in 2002.
And now all kids in the area that like hockey want to play hockey, but for the years that the Caps were either not contending or contending and collapsing early, you don't know if those kids are like, well, I kind of like Sidney Crosby, win the Stanley Cup. Your kids are easily swayed by who's great. So, you might have a kid growing up in Silver Spring that's like, I don't really like the Caps because they lose every year. So I'm going to like Sidney Crosby, or I'm going to like Connor McDavid, and they're going to show up with those jerseys on.
Oh, we had that with the Yankees and the Red Sox here for 15 years, except those kids here just played lacrosse. Literally.
Right. But if the Orioles won the World Series, forget the Yankees. It would be Adam Jones and Manny Machado forever. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference in winning a championship. So any of those kids who are around the area going, I kind of like the Caps, I guess. I don't know. I really like Connor McDavid. He's the best player in the world. Now, he's legendary. Like, I'm all in the Caps. I want to be like Kuzi. I want to be like Jacob Vrana, because they're going to remember Jacob Vrana scored a goal the night the Caps won the Stanley Cup. So that, to me, is the bump, and that everything, builds off of this moment, because these kids that weren't 100% all in are Orioles fans now are just like, just trade Machado to the Yankees now. Like, why do I have to wait for this inevitably to happen? Like, they just expect the worst, and because the worst always happens. But if Machado led them to a World Series, you're Manny Machado for life. So,
well, Manny Machado will be somewhere else in 6 weeks. So I was going to say, dude, it's a good thing that this thing ended where I can towel off and, ease out with some World Cup here. Because if we just went off the cliff and hockey stopped and there was nothing to watch but, 275 baseball out of the Orioles, it would be a long-winded training camp around here. But World Cup's going to keep me square, and we'll blink, and before you know it, we'll have hockey again, and we'll figure out this whole Trotz thing. Hey, it'll be a little while before I see you again, so you get back with the family and the kids and enjoy your summer and enjoy all your Stanley Cup champs gear and all that stuff. It was a long, strange trip, man. It was a lot of fun watching hockey the last couple months.
It was a long, strange trip, and it's led to strangers stopping strangers just to shake their hands. And it has been fun to go right down the Grateful Dead highway with you. And yeah, best time I've ever had in my life. When we were all done after the parade, all of us hugged each other and just said, "Hey, man, be proud of the work we've done." And, can't wait for October. Let's raise that banner.
It was good, but it wasn't the Hempstead Parkway or whatever the hell you
Hempstead Turnpike.
Turnpike, whatever it was. Be good. There he goes. Rob Carlin. You know him from NBC Washington, NBC Sports. You can follow him out on Twitter as well. Let me give you the correct Twitter. It is Rob Carlin, NBCS is the way to follow him. And, I hope he's like a cicada and goes dormant here for a little while. There's been a lot of hockey coverage, and those guys work their butts off, all of them. So I'm tracking them all down. find Alan May and Tarek and Joe B before it's all over with. When I do, they'll be in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault getting observations. I'll track down Coach Trotz. We're going to bring the Cup to Baltimore at some point. I don't know when or why or how. I just know it's going to happen. So I have faith. I had faith that they'd win the Cup. I now have faith that we'll bring the Cup here and we'll toast and drink out of the Cup and be idiots with the Cup and do radio with the Cup, because that's how it has to be when you win the Cup. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Anything you missed is in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault. All of our interviews, doing some World Cup, doing some baseball, doing some football. Going to be doing my Dear Orioles series beginning next week. We'll be hearing that on the radio as well. We're going to pass the time during this World Cup. We're not going to fix the Orioles, but we are going to point out the inconsistency, shall we say. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.